Hello and welcome. My name is Season Summers, and we're going to be talking about some tips and tricks all throughout this semester to help you along your All-State audition journey. We are going to talk about today rocking out the rhythms on Etude number 24. That's going to be our first priority. All right, so what you see up here is an excerpt from the practice handout that I've created that you can get over here if you scan the QR code. So I would encourage you to do that if you haven't already. And we're going to talk about three things. So the first thing we're doing here is we're isolating the rhythm. That's in Etude 24. So if you look up here, I've taken all the rhythms that you're going to find in the entire Etude, and I've just put the rhythm and the articulations that are there as well, but I just did them on two notes, A's and B's. Instead of having to work on fingers, we're just going to work on those. The next thing we're going to talk about is inflection, rhythmic inflection, and also articulation, and how those things work together to give the Etude style, which is really, really important. So in order to explain that, the best thing I can do is play a little bit. So let's look up here at rhythm and articulation option number 1. So I'm going to put the metronome on an eighth note click because the majority of students are going to be learning this in 3, which is great because the slower you start, the more attention to detail you can use. So I'm going to have it clicking 100, and that way you know if you want to keep that tempo when you're practicing, you can do that. All right, when I talk about inflection, what I mean is that we need to decide which notes are going to sound more important than others. That largely has to do with what meter you're in. Beat 1 is always the most important no matter what meter, but it's particularly important in this because right now we're going to play in 3, but eventually it's going to be in 1, so the metronome's only going to be clicking on 1. So we want to make sure that we lean on beat 1, but then we also remember to relax after beat 1. Okay, so we're going to be thinking 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, there's not going to be a huge volume change, but there's a weight change. Okay, so that's what I want you to be thinking about. So let me turn the metronome on. One, two, three, 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to play number 1, and I want you to listen to how I'm leaning on beat 1 and then relaxing after that. I'll play it a few times in a row. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So I'm moving with beat 1 also to just show you how I'm feeling it in 1, but you don't have to do that. You can do that though if it helps. Okay, so 1 and 2, 3, 1 and 2, 3. And then let's also look at number 2 because we have a long note in rhythm number 2 here. So we have a quarter note with an accent followed by an eighth note. So the quarter note, while you're holding it, we should hear a little bit of a decay on that note. And then the last note of the measure, we're going to think of that as a pickup. So it's going to launch you or spring you into the next downbeat. So the air might have just a little bit of a crescendo. In other words, that's what creates a pickup. You can take that idea and apply it to all of these rhythms. As we get towards the end of the measure, then it's going to propel you towards the next downbeat. That is so helpful when you're taking something that's supposed to be in 1, and that's like a long-term goal. So we're going to start in 3 and work towards 1. Propelling towards beat 1 each time will help you with that. All right, so here's number 2. I'll play it a few times in a row. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Once you have the rhythms by themselves, then you can start linking some of these together. So for instance, it makes a lot of sense to play number 1 and then number 2 and then play number 1 and then number 2 because that's the rhythm that we have in the first 4 measures of this etude. So I'm going to do that now. This would be a step above from where we began. So I'm going to play 1, 2, 1, 2. You're welcome to play along if you have your oboe out. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay. So now you can hear the inflection. You can also check that by turning the metronome off, and can you still hear where beat 1 is really easily? That's a good way to think of it. Okay. Now, with the articulation, I wanted to mention that staccatos are subjective. That's why they're often confusing. What does a staccato sound like? And that's because that depends on the context of the music. So how long a staccato is incredibly subjective. If you have a private lesson teacher, absolutely have that conversation with them. I'm sure they'll give you direction on what to do, what they think sounds best, and you should do that. But if you don't, try them different lengths and see what you like, and do it the way that you like it. It doesn't need to match what I'm doing. What does matter with staccatos is the beginning of the note, and a lot of times students overlook that. So if you can make sure that the beginning has a crisp, clear attack, that will make everything much more clear in the context of the etude. So a clear T at the beginning of each of the staccatos. Think of it in that way. The last thing I wanted to mention is let's look down at the second line of rhythms that I have here. We have some slurs here. So maybe I'll look at number 9. Let's look at number 9. When you have back and forth between slurs and staccatos, we are going to need to kind of lift off the end of the slur. I don't mean chop it off abruptly. We don't want a harshness. We don't even necessarily want a silence, but you're going to lean on the first note of the slur and relax on the end of the slur. So in number 9, dia, and then the 3 articulated notes will be pickups that will launch you into the next downbeat. So there'll be a little crescendo there. So I'll play number 9 as well so that you can hear the difference. So here's example number 9. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So you can start by just practicing all of these combinations. And then here's some practice tricks to use with those combinations. Number 1, vary the tempo, right? I have it on 8th note equals 100 right now. If that feels super easy for you, then do it faster if you want, right? If that feels too hard, go slower. Or if I'm just trying to test my ability to play in time, I'll just kind of move the metronome around and try different tempos. It's great to just adjust what you're doing so that your brain stays engaged. Try different pitches, right? It doesn't have to be A's and B's. Use any pitches you want. You can use arpeggios or scales. Any pitches you want, you can do. It doesn't have to be the pitches that are printed on the etude. Third thing, you should be doing it with and without the metronome. I like to alternate back and forth so that I don't become comfortable in one of those and not the other. Experiment with articulation. We talked about that briefly on the previous slide. So decide what you want the staccatos to sound like. And then after you've made that decision and you like how they sound, then the next thing is consistency. Make sure they all sound the same throughout the etude. How do we know that? Look at the next circle. Record yourself. Super important when you're practicing to make sure that you're recording yourself, because then you can be the audience member as well as the performer, right? Listen to yourself. Do you like how it sounds, right? And if you don't, then you can jot some notes down and then go back to the practice room and start working on those things. All right. Do you guys have any ideas? Did I maybe inspire you to think of some other way that you could practice this? If so, I would love for you to share that in the comments so that everyone can benefit from that. One thing that I thought of after making the slides was you could practice these just on a reed, right? You can practice articulation on your reed without your oboe. So that's something else that you could do. So that brings us to the end of our tips and tricks for this week. I want you to stay tuned because I'm going to come out with a video every Friday for this entire semester where we focus on one specific element of the music. So if you don't want to miss out, click the subscribe button and you'll get these videos every week. Also, if you have a topic that you would love for me to cover in a video, if you'll leave that in the comments below, I'll do my best to incorporate that in one of the videos that I have planned for this semester. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next Friday. Bye.